Hello, friends. Welcome to an episode of We Vote for Kodos, a podcast on the surrealist politics in America. This is Alex, podcasting from Louisiana, and with me is my good friend Caius, who's currently in Colorado. How are you doing, Caius?
I'm doing well. I'm sitting here enjoying a nice little glass of tequila, getting everything in the mood, and yeah, ready to enjoy the evening.
Yeah. I'm currently drinking a Pinot Grigio from my favorite vineyard, Black Box.
Okay, yes.
So, it's
one-upping
me
on the fanciness right there.
Well, I'm not sure if having box wine would be considered very fancy. I'm not sure if the French have actually appreciated that form of wine. So I know that they're very particular with their wine in that country, and they love having a cork and a bottle and wine together. So I don't think they're trying to they don't want to desecrate their sacred wine as we have done here in the United States. Usually the United States loves to desecrate certain cultures.
Well, that certainly is the case, but while we're desecrating it, we can still be fancy in our own way. I have a feeling that Orson Welles would be proud of the box wine.
Oh, yes. In fact, he probably would have been a spokesperson for Black Box and probably would have drank the whole box before shooting would have started. So,
the French, the finest of boxed wines.
So let's get straight to the point. So currently, we're currently in election cycle, and we want to cover on this week's episode on the DNC and the RNC. So 2 weeks ago, the DNC, the Democrats had broadcast their DNC and nominated Joe Biden as their presidential candidate, along with Kamala Harris as their VP candidate. And the RNC did just recently presented their convention, and Donald Trump, of course, and Mike Pence were nominated. A complete
shocker. Nobody was expecting that.
I didn't expect that at all. Yeah. So I was expecting another bland white person to be the presidential nominee.
Fortunately, we are being completely inclusive on the Republican side. We are definitely going to make sure that we are going to keep our first orange president.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he is definitely going to get the Florida voters for this election cycle because of his orangeness. So
them and the Georgians.
So currently, the Democrats have argued for their case that pretty much their argument is that they're very anti-Trump, that this country would be a lot better if Trump were not in power, and that Trump has been negligent over the COVID-19 situation that we currently have in this country, and the Republicans on the other hand are trying to tackle the riots, the economy, lockdowns, and trying to, I guess, preserve American culture, American heritage, and history. For this whole year, we've been seeing a lot of protesters, rioters, pretty much trying to protest against, the Confederate flag, Confederate statues, as well as statues of people that they consider racist years ago. So
and let's be perfectly honest about it. Also, a large part of that would also be police brutality. Shootings of people going on. At this point, I think we've kind of moved away from the statues to where that's a bit of a secondary aspect.
So, Caius, what are your thoughts on this current, on what the Democrats are selling and what the Republicans are selling? What do you think? Who do you think is going to win? Who has, I guess, won the voters right now? And is there any hopes for the Democrats?
That's the thing. Is to be perfectly honest, it's one of those situations where it comes across as I got no idea, and I feel like I would be a fool to try to judge it one way or the other. I know
I,
where my personal opinion lies. I certainly think that at this point, I think Trump has it. Because just
I'm
kind of looking at the way that the RNC and the DNC presented themselves, the general impression that I get from the DNC is basically just we don't like Trump and we like riots. I mean, that seems to be kind of what I'm getting from that.
But isn't that America? Like we love riots. We love rioting. We've always been a riot country.
I would say that riots certainly happen in this country, and often for good reason, but I would say that nobody likes them.
No, I'm kind of with you there, but I really don't know who's really going to win. The Democrats have made their case as well as the Republicans, but I think one of the big questions is whether if voters, especially I guess the big voters, the swing voters, blue collar workers, the people who are currently living in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, who did go for Trump 4 years ago, and suburban moms as well, whether that they can tolerate another 4 years of Trump. And that's like we've seen Trump in action. We've seen him throughout the 4 years. And can this country go on with another person like him?
I think where it is we're probably good. If that's the measure that we're looking at, then we're probably going to see a lot of support for Trump there. I mean, it was just recently. I think it was actually today where the Iron Range came out and endorsed Trump. That is 6 Minnesota Democratic mayors from, blue-collar towns, basically representing industry, blue-collar workers within Minnesota. And they've been Democratic for years, lockstep. And they came out and they are endorsing Trump. They say that he's the one that they're going for, like the first Republican that's ever been endorsed by this bloc.
When was the last time that they endorsed a Republican? Like that was it.
What I'm saying.
Trump?
I would
just
need
Trump?
to 100% confirm this, but I don't think that they've ever endorsed a Republican.
That's pretty interesting. This sounds like a repeat of the 2019 general election in the United Kingdom, where pretty much a solid labor. So pretty much the two major parties in the United Kingdom are the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, and the Labour Party is basically the center left party, or more left actually than the Democrats, and the center right party is the Conservative Party. And for a very long time, there were certain counties within the United Kingdom that were a stronghold for the Labour Party, and just last year in 2019, the Conservatives were able to win certain counties that were labor strongholds, and we might see this. We might see a repeat, something similar to what had happened last year in the UK, and a repeat of 2016 during this election, where blue collar states, primarily blue collar states like Ohio and Michigan, may go for Trump again. They did so 4 years ago, so there might be a repeat of that.
It feels like it, again, this goes back to what I was saying before. Like, I can't say definitively. I mean, this is all just general opinions I have and the way I'm reading it. And I mean, it feels like we're all just trapped in our own bubbles. So we could all be subject to our own biases, of course. But from what I'm seeing is like, it looks to me like it could be a much stronger situation than it was in 2016. I think we'll see a bunch of the same people who voted for Trump in 2016 continue to do so. And I think we'll see even more people jumping to his side. That's how it's looking to me.
See, I'm always kind of skeptical about that. Just like I really don't believe like since 2016 happened, I don't believe in a predestined results in elections anymore.
Oh, of course not.
It's always going to be a surprise, and that's how it should be. We shouldn't have a very fatalist or nihilistic sense of how elections go.
Well, to me, it's more so that it feels like we're living on a random number generator, and every single day things swing in completely bizarre and unexpected directions. So who knows what even will happen 3 hours from now?
Yeah, math.random. kind of situation.
Damn right, yes.
Damn right. Okay, to all you programmer nerds out there. But again, but yeah, like I think this is no, it's very interesting right now, just because this is, for like in 2008, it seemed as if, like, at least in my bubble, I live in California, it seemed as if Obama was going to win, and he did win. And then 2012, I always thought that Obama would win 2012 anyway, especially because it's really hard, and especially it's really hard to get an incumbent out of office, and Trump would be able to benefit from that this year, because it's like, historically speaking, like, pretty much there's only a few presidents who've ever lost as incumbents. George H.W. Bush, about
from our lifetimes. I think he's the only one. Yeah,
he's pretty much the only one. And Jimmy Carter, and Gerald Ford. I mean, anything could happen. It's like, I think the major question.
Anything certainly could happen. But I think one of the things is, and I'm glad you brought up the 2012 election, is we also have to consider what kind of people could be changing over who would suddenly be in favor of Trump, like actually wanting to vote for him, who didn't like him in the first place. Because I look back on the Obama years. Initially, I was not in favor of Obama. I didn't much care for a lot of the things that he was promoting initially. But once he was in office, at that time, I was really big on the whole national security kick. That was where most of my interest laid. And when it came to 2012, to me, it was no question that I was going to vote for Obama. And it's specifically for something that most Democrats at the time, I know for a fact because I've talked to them, they don't like to admit is the case. But to me, it was the selling point and made me want to vote for him. I was 100% in favor of the drone program. I loved the extrajudicial assassination of terrorists. And because Obama was doing that, that sealed it for me. Like, I did not think Mitt Romney was going to do that. And so I was in favor for Obama for doing that. And also something that made Democrats not like Obama. Another thing that I liked him for, he didn't shut down Gitmo. Again, those are things that I think we also have to take into consideration that are really hard to judge and gauge. Is how many weird little things that a lot of us don't really think of has Trump done or accomplished that could have swayed a bunch of voters who otherwise, especially in 2016, would not have been on his side.
I think now that we've had 4 years of Trump, we definitely know how he administrates the country, and when the election results had come out in 2016, or actually during the whole election cycle of 2016, and when Trump got the nomination, there was a sense that Trump would be, at least in my bubble. So I was in California and Colorado at that time, and Trump was considered we thought Trump was crazy. He would run the country into the ground, and he would act as a tyrant because to be honest, so when Trump had pretty much locked the Republican nomination for president of the United States, I didn't really like how he acted, his behavior. He reminded me of certain Banana Republic dictators, just the way he acted. Like he didn't act presidential. He was never stoic. To
really put this into the most stark relief possible, he acted exactly like how he acted only a few years prior when he was shaving Vince McMahon's head during WWE matches.
Well, yeah, this guy.
I mean, we are literally living in a timeline where we have the first president who appeared in wrestling events.
And not just appeared in a wrestling event, who actually wrestled in the event, knocked down Vince McMahon.
Just to anybody who is unaware of that, seriously, look it up. It's hilarious. I don't care what your politics are.
I think it's hilarious as well. But like, to me, I didn't like his personality, his behavior, and that's what a lot of people. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people had voted for Hillary as well. I wouldn't call myself a Hillary supporter, but I was a Hillary voter. I did vote for her just because I knew what I was getting. I didn't necessarily liked it. Hillary had her scandals. She was pretty seedy as a person. She was pretty fake. She was very fake, and I thought Trump to some extent was very fake as well, because he acted as if he were a snake oil salesman, just shouting out, "Stop! Build this wall in here," and you got act against China and whatnot. But now that I've seen,
ultimately, I can say it seems like he's turned out to be correct on China.
Well, yeah. I was going to say, but after having seen him as our president for the past 4 years, first of all, he was never a tyrant. The good thing about our government that there are checks, and pretty much our institutions have checked his powers. But he's also has had a level of restraint that other presidents haven't really had. He has restrained the federal government over religious issues. He has definitely provided restraint on certain things. He has nominated a lot of conservative judges into federal courts, and he's actually one of the most transparent presidents we've ever had. Whatever he's thinking, he actually tweets it out right there and then. Like, as opposed to like Obama, Bush, and Clinton, where they would say one thing but then go another. So Trump has always been very, very proactive in voicing his own opinions before they even become policy.
Well, very transparent, I think you could say.
Yep, very, very transparent. So he's very transparent. He's not a tyrant. But for some reason, and one thing, he's also not. I don't think he's a racist. He may have his own prejudices, but he's not a racist as how certain people in the media purport him to be. I don't really see any sort of evidence that could provide proof that he's a racist. Like, I don't see that. Like for some reason, this is one of these platitudes that the liberals and the left have spread, that he's been a racist person. I mean, look at his cabinet. He has Ben Carson as Secretary of Housing. He's hired Omarosa. He has Mitch McConnell's wife, who's Asian, serving as a cabinet secretary. And plus, he's not homophobic at all. Like, he's actually been the most LGBTQ supportive Republican president in history.
I don't even think it's a matter of Republican president. I think just president, period.
Yeah. President, period. I mean, yeah.
A lot of people like to conveniently forget, like, Obama wasn't in favor of gay marriage.
That's
Not
true.
until after the Supreme Court finally decided the issue.
And Trump did, and then Trump also spoke, did provide a pretty moving speech after the Pulse shootings, and at the RNC in 2016, he did reassert that he would protect American gays against radical terrorists. Just flat out said we would defend our Americans regardless of their sexual orientation, which is great. So there are moments where I have disagreed with him within the past 4 years. I don't think I don't think we should be as close to Russia as we should be, but then again, I think that's also just a way to leverage, to hedge our bets against, like, playing with China. In
many ways, what we're looking at right now seems to be kind of the inverse situation of where we were back in the 1960s with Richard Nixon, where we had two communist powers on that side of the world. We had the Russians and we had the Chinese. And the Russians and the Chinese did not like each other. We were obviously way more concerned about the Russians, the Soviets, than we were about the Chinese. And so Richard Nixon opened up relations with China, tried to make things much more stable and cordial with them to really drive a wedge between those two powers.
Drive a wedge. Yep.
And I mean, here's the thing: is like I'm not saying definitively like this is what's going on right now, but the parallels are there, and it's easy to make that interpretation. Is it kind of feels like this might be the exact same situation, just with the fields reversed? You've got Russia and you've got China. They're still in the same part of the world. They're still opposed to each other. They still don't like each other. China has now become the big communist threat that we need to be worried about. Russia is on the smaller tier of things, having lost a lot of its prestige from like the Soviet era. Putin notwithstanding, because I mean, I think everything when it comes to Russia just comes down to Putin more than anything else. Putin notwithstanding, I feel like we're in a position where we can work with Russia way more than we could work with China.
Well, at least Russia, although it may be a facade of democracy, has a democratic government nonetheless.
It's an absolute facade.
It's but it's still.
I mean, let's not have any illusions about it. It's totalitarian, so.
Yeah, but it's not as totalitarian as it was during the Soviet times. Whereas China is a complete and utter authoritarian government.
It feels like is that Russia is more trying to troll people and fuck with people to get things on the margins, whereas China is truly trying to buy dominance of the planet.
Literally, yeah. I think it's kind of scary how much Trump was right about China. Now that we've seen how our multinational corporations have interacted with the country. Most recently, we've had Disney and the NBA. So especially the NBA situation, where I believe like one of the NBA commissioners or execs had called out China on the Uyghur situation on Twitter. And in response, China had come down on the NBA, had threatened to cancel their relationship with the NBA. And then you had some of these like NBA players coming out in defense of the Chinese Communist government. That's just crazy. Like, what the heck? Like,
and it's a continuous thing. I mean, there's been plenty of stories recently about people trying to sign up to get custom printed jerseys. Oh, they'll put a hard and fast stop on if you want to put free Hong Kong on your jersey. They won't give you that.
No, see, this is I'm not sure if Trump was addressing. He was strictly addressing trade, but to some degree he was definitely right that China was trying to control is trying to influence and control the world through economics and business. Trump was absolutely right. China is our major rival, and we haven't had this kind of discussion over China in quite a long time. We had always thought that China would become like us. Like there's this whole idea, this whole theory that if a country becomes rich over time, it will eventually become a democratic country. We saw that in places such as South Korea. We saw that in places like Taiwan, in places like in countries in Latin America where these countries embrace free market economics. They eventually voted out or threw out their dictators, and it essentially became a democratic government overnight. We saw that in Spain as well. And in extension, we thought that China would be the same thing, but China has not become that democratic government that we had predicted. In fact, it has doubled down on authoritarianism within the past 10 years with the election of Xi Jinping in power, who's the current chairman and president of China. So
Yeah.
so right now we're at a quandary. We have a country that's not only getting rich, but is also getting more authoritarian. This is a complete and utter contradiction to what we thought what was going to happen for China. So,
well, and the contradiction is one thing where we might have had rose-tinted glasses in terms of our expectations. I mean, again, we only have to look a couple of years ago to like the whole Arab Spring thing in Egypt, for example. Oh, they can have democracy. Well, it turns out that democracy, it doesn't mean that they're going to vote for things that are going to be in our interests. Islamic Brotherhood, you know.
Yes, exactly. So I guess
but of course, China doesn't have democracy, so I guess that's kind of a moot point. But
well,
I see what you're saying, but it's like I guess it was naive of us to kind of expect it to go in that direction.
Yeah, we had a certain sense that there was always a destined trend in history. I believe the word would be in academics with like a Hegelian sense of history, where like it's predestined. Like there's always kind of a route towards a certain goal, like how communists think, right? But however, we were like the communists in that like this was how things were going to be. Like with capitalism, it eventually becomes democracy, and just as like how communists think, where with capitalism, eventually becomes communism or something like that. So there was always a set route for countries to follow in order to become like us, the United States, but that didn't happen. And Trump has pretty much called out China on various issues and stuff. So yeah, he was definitely right about that. We should readdress our trade situation with China, but I don't think he has been as assertive on the Uyghur situation as some of his other the people he has worked with in his cabinet.
No, I agree with you there. That is one where he's been disconcertingly quiet. And if you really want to deal with China, frankly, it's one of those things where you got to play the politics of it. It should be called out regardless of anything else. But even if economics is his main focus, you got to call out the human rights abuses. I mean, at this point, China's making Nazi Germany look inefficient. There's no other way of putting it.
Well, to be honest, Trump has never been the humanitarian. He always has thought of business and how it would benefit his country and himself.
Like, yeah, I agree, which is one of the things that I personally like about him. Right. But it's one of those things where he'd have to take a broader view and consider the considerations of other people who may not line up on him in terms of business, but appeal to the human rights aspects, which frankly is a big aspect that we should be concerned about regardless of anything else.
He lets his Secretary of State to do the criticizing, but he doesn't do the criticizing himself. Trump has a sense of not just real politics, but just of business. We're very good friends with the Saudis. To be honest, I'm one of those people who don't like the Saudis at all. As a government, if you think China is very autocratic, I mean, Saudi is autocratic in its own way, religiously and through radical Sharia thinking. But
I don't even know if it's Sharia so much as that Wahhabism.
Yeah, sorry.
Though I couldn't necessarily tell you truly what the distinction is.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, so I always thought those were interchangeable. But I
mean, to me, just one of the biggest things is whatever their strain of things is, I despise the fact that they are destroying historical sites related to Islamic faith and are basically replacing it with a gaudy Las Vegas-esque casino.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at images of the Hajj, you know.
Are we talking about Saudis or China? Oh yeah, we're
Saudis.
talking about
Saudis.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I thought that was what we were discussing.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking about. But I guess my point is that Trump is very realistic. Although Saudi Arabia is like the last absolute monarchy on earth, and is very very authoritarian with its own people. In fact, it has become more authoritarian now with Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the crown prince, is now in power. And he actually uses technology to go after dissidents through Twitter and other social media. Trump has basically said, like, we're friends regardless of what you do. Like, so long as we have allies, we're good. Like, so long as you're in the American alliance, we're good. Like, we're not going to criticize you on what you do with your people. That's your business. We're nationalists, and Trump is a strong nationalist. He doesn't believe in nations intervening with other nations' cultures, politics, and laws. He's actually the first isolationist president we've had in years. He's strongly isolationist, and I guess the only reason why we're going against China is just because of our current trade policies. He's not necessarily going after like the civil rights issues of Uyghurs.
I mean, it is one of those things from his perspective. The Uyghur situation doesn't affect us. The economics affects us.
Yeah.
And no, you're right about that in terms of what's going on with Saudi Arabia. Whatever they're doing internally is not directly affecting us so much as what we can get out of them with the cooperation that you're describing, which, let's be honest, has been paying dividends. I mean, we've now got that peace treaty where Saudi Arabia is officially recognizing Israel as a country and establishing actual diplomatic relations for the first time since Israel fucking existed in modern history.
It's not Saudi Arabia. I believe it's the United Arab Emirates.
Oh, you're right about that. Yeah, no, you're right. I apologize. I was, yeah.
But it could happen if maybe Trump is elected from president again, reelected. So, but I think we've been talking too much about Trump. What does Biden have to offer to us? What do you think? The DNC, the Democrats, have to offer in terms of foreign policy?
I mean, here's the thing. The problem is that I don't think Biden has anything to offer. I think it's a matter of what Kamala Harris has to offer, because that's who we're truly voting for. I've said it before in terms of like private conversations with people, and I'll say it right here. Biden is gone in terms of his mental faculties. And I know that sounds like that's the easy thing to complain about and everything, but I mean, like, I look at Joe Biden, I listen to Joe Biden talking, and I'm somebody who forgives a lot of gaffes. Like, generally, I don't care. There were a ton of gaffes that Biden was making in the past year that it was like, okay, I mean, like, he just made a mistake. I don't care. But at this point, I look at him and I see my grandfather, and my grandfather is in the midst of dementia. And I look at Joe Biden and I see exactly what's going on with my grandfather. It's the exact same thing. Getting irrationally angry at people just because he gets frustrated and he's not quite certain how to proceed when anybody's challenging him, and just not knowing where he is, just making mistake after mistake after mistake in terms of like very basic statements. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't think Joe Biden is offering anything. I think Joe Biden is basically gone and is a puppet, and frankly, at this point, it's elder abuse.
Do you think this whole idea that he uses his past history of stuttering as a crux is for show? Like, that's not the issue. It's really just because he's just has severe dementia at this point.
Well, I don't think he's doing it. I think it's the Democratic Party and his handlers that are doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that this whole idea that Biden was picking his VP just looked like a show. Like, we all very well know that Kamala Harris was basically picked through committee. Like it seemed like Biden had no control over the matter. just because like you kind of just sense it. Biden is not really there. However, he was like I've had Republican friends who have said that had he run in 2016 or 10 years earlier, they would have voted for him because he's such a likable guy. Like he seemed to be like like he seemed to be like a working Joe. He has a very very amiable name. Like he sounds very friendly. He's not as aloof as Hillary. He definitely cares for, I guess he definitely cares for the people he's interacting with. He actually seems very genuine. However, just because of how senile he has become, there's just no way they're going to vote for Biden. There's just no way. And there's definitely a lot of non-Republicans, Democrats, moderates, people out there who will just not vote for him just because he's essentially just a puppet. And to me, like when I saw Joe Biden speaking at the DNC, it was an okay speech, but for some reason the media had come out and said like it was like a home run. Like I saw like the New York Times come out like release like a headline online saying like wow, like this was a pounding, basically like Biden destroys Trump, one of those like tacky headlines that you see online. But like the speech itself was just
that's
okay.
One of those
like,
things,
it's like
that's one of those things there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's one of the problems that I have with what the DNC is presenting in general and how everybody's reacting to it is that everything seems to be just completely counter to Trump. I'm not necessarily understanding what it is that they're trying to offer in place of Trump.
Yeah,
it really is coming across as like we're just not Trump. That's all we are.
Well,
we don't have any plans or ideas or anything. We are just going to not be Trump, and that's what we're running on.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what they've pretty much covered during the DNC. Although they did give like a voice, like they did cover certain issues about Black Lives Matter, women, and all that, but they never really provided like a new idea. Like pretty much the Democrats are being run by these old septuagenarians, octogenarians, like soon to be octogenarians, and who used to be a lot more vibrant 20 years ago when they were like the New Democrats, when they were trying to be a vibrant party that went against the status quo. That was the Republican Party at that time. No, they weren't like the Republicans had held power for like 12 years since 1980 at that point, and then they're trying to come up with like a new strategy for themselves, and they became like the New Democrats, and like they embraced a bit of like free market, the free market. But no, we now have Democrats who are kind of a bit divided, in that.
It really feels like saying divided is putting it mildly.
Yeah, like you have some moderate Democrats, you have some liberal Democrats, and then you have leftist Democrats. There were Republicans who had come out, who were shown on the who did speak at the DNC criticizing Trump, but I think there are only so few Republicans who actually will who will speak out against Trump, because I think it's the other way around, where I think there are actually a lot more Democrats who will vote for Trump than Republicans who will vote for Biden. I'm suspecting that's the case, because I think a lot of people have been turned off by the major riots that have been happening around the country, and
the lack of response to those riots more than anything else.
Lack of response, and a lot, all these riots have happened in democratically controlled cities, Seattle, Portland. I mean, even in my parents' hometown in California, in the suburb, actually, there have been riots in the suburbs. And we just saw one recently with Kenosha, Wisconsin. That is not a major city. It is basically a major suburb that only has like about like 50,000 people, 60,000 people. That's not a major city, and yet it had experienced a riot in the past month, which is
past week, yeah.
the past week actually, yeah. So, a lot of people are just tired of this bullshit. Like, where are these elected officials coming out in defense, providing the defense of business owner establishments and facilities when these riots happen? We don't ever see a response from our democratically elected officials. Like they're all getting very hesitant of like acting out, trying to protect our businesses.
Well, that's the thing, is like you don't see that on the national level. Because on the national level, and this is the problem, is like it looks like that is the direction of the National Party itself, is to be in favor of the rioting. Because you do see it on some local levels. I was very happy to see in my own town, here in Colorado, we had our mayor, who was a Democrat. We had riots started because of what happened in Kenosha. And immediately, our mayor, again a Democrat, he came out and just simply said, this is not acceptable. Like, we arrested 12 people overnight with this stuff. We are charging them to the fullest extent of the law, and we're going to increase police presence. It's not going to happen. And guess what? For the past week, while things have been going nuts in other parts of the country, nothing's been happening in Colorado.
I think Colorado is just like one of those unicorns where you pretty much have like balanced politics. I have Republican friends who just complain about the politics there, but I think it's actually quite a purple state. It's pretty center.
It's purple in like the truest sense of the word.
Yeah. Not sure what the trend is in terms of the state, but I guess that's besides the point. I mean,
I'm mainly bringing it up because you don't see anybody in the DNC touting that kind of response. I actually would wonder how many people who might listen to this would even be aware of that response from Colorado.
I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if the higher ups are even allowing that response to be broadcast. I think that's also
because it runs counter to the narrative that they have.
Exactly, where everyone's just a peaceful protester when actually
when that is clearly not the case.
Not the case.
I mean, we only have to look at all of the burnt out car shells of that one car dealership in Kenosha that got torched.
Exactly.
And all I can think to myself is that you've just destroyed somebody's entire business. You've destroyed their entire livelihood. What does that have to do with whatever kind of police brutality thing that you were arguing about?
And you turn someone who could have potentially supported you against you. Just by your action, just the way you acted against his business or her business.
It's not even the business. The problem that I have is that it seems that you've got a lot of people trying to phrase this in terms of like, oh, you think the businesses are more important than people's lives? No, I think people's lives are important, and their businesses are their lives. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem that I have, is that you seem to see a lot of people on the left who refuse to believe that somebody's livelihood, I mean, it's right there in the name. We call it a livelihood because it is your life.
Well, the thing is that they kind of lack that empathy because a lot of the people on the left are not necessarily business owners or have ever even worked at a business. It seems like as if like these people just lack jobs. And all they can do on their spare time is riot.
And that's the key thing right there, is because that's one of those things that really drives me nuts, is you hear a lot of people saying like, okay, well, these business owners have insurance. They'll be fine. Who cares about them? One, that's not true. The insurance isn't going to pay for all of this kind of stuff. But two, you are gleefully ignoring everybody who is employed there. Maybe the guy who owns the car lot gets the insurance money and can possibly get himself back on his feet. What happens to the guys that he employed, the guys who were selling those cars? What happens to the people who were involved in the supply chain who actually brought cars in and stocked the lot and kept them clean and like put in the price stickers and everything? What happens to them? They're all out of a job. And they're not getting any kind of insurance money. They're not getting paid. They're not getting anything. So you've destroyed countless lives. And that's one of those things that really drives me nuts more than anything else. And that is one of those things that I really hope that the vast majority of people are waking up to, is that there is a cascade ripple effect here that is destroying so many lives outwards. And it really feels like the left is not paying attention to that or acknowledging it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, what goes into the thinking of someone? So like, I'm trying to understand how the left thinks. So it seems as if whatever happens, whatever act that they commit, regardless if it's a protest or if it's a riot, it's all for a good cause. Is that how they think? Is this where we've come to, in terms of how the left thinks? Any sort of revolution, any sort of violence committed to someone is all for a good cause. Is this why some of these people are facing a sort of impunity in certain states, in parts of the media? Like everyone's just like. It's so strange to me.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is I would be very genuinely interested in talking to somebody on that side directly, if I could. And you would think it would be easy in the age of the internet, but I mean, like, the moment that you try to question something, it's like the entire conversation breaks down. Nobody wants to have the conversation. Yeah, but no, exactly what you're asking. I legitimately do want to ask that of them, to try to understand more where they're coming from.
We recently had this one episode, like, just to continue on this point. So right after the RNC ended, a couple Republicans were walking back home,
Rand
walking
Paul.
back to their car, and Rand Paul was one of them. And you had these protesters who had basically accosted him, like started to even attack him. And luckily he had bodyguards with him, and good for Rand Paul, because to have bodyguards, because he was also one of those people shot like 4 years ago at that baseball game.
Oh, he was? I forgot about that.
Yeah, so it's good that he had protection, so he didn't really get hurt. But I would be fearful for myself if I were Rand Paul, just because of what happened. But like but to the point is that these people were asking him to name Breonna Taylor and like force him to say that name, and as if like he had some sort of share in the blame for her death. But what the irony is that he's actually one of the people who sponsored the bill to reform policing in the United States. I know, not policing. I believe it was.
No. Here's the thing. He is literally one of the authors of the Breonna Taylor bill, because he is actually the senator from that district. And he authored the bill to stop those knockless raids. I believe it's what it's called.
Now, grant you,
he was 100% on the side of those people, and he already demonstrated it by creating law to do exactly what theoretically they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that really comes down to, what are these people even arguing for then? I don't think they even have a point, none that they are aware of.
No,
they don't know what it is that they're doing. They're just trying to cause mayhem. Because Rand Paul, of all people, was one of the last ones who you should have accosted in this manner, because he is directly doing exactly what I would think these people are wanting.
Granted, he was wearing a mask, so maybe they didn't really recognize him. But at the same time,
I don't buy that at all.
But I understand. I don't think that was. Even if he hadn't worn a mask, I think he would still been attacked and accosted. But I think what we're trying to get at here is that it seems as if a lot of these rioters and protesters, they're very young. They have a lot of energy. They're all trying to fight for something, and we've seen this happen with Occupy, with the 60s movement, but I think they've become more violent. And I think we have people in this country who are trying to find a sense of purpose, right? These are some of the people who probably had gone to the job market and looked unemployable, or who have had had a lost sense of themselves, like maybe have like a Caucasian person saying, well, I'm not sure what to do with my life, and maybe I need to fight for something, and they decide to be part of the left. Like they feel like what they're doing is they have like this crusade mentality, like they're like religious zealots, and I think you're right.
I think is the good term.
Yes. I think you're right in that a lot of these people probably don't even know what they're fighting for. They just love to fight. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we have these people who go harass, not just harass, but also hit and commit a violence against people that have opposing opinions. It's maybe they just don't know what they're fighting for, and they just kind of like have taken in like a lot of propaganda and a lot of platitudes and mottos and chants without really thinking what they're fighting for. Now, it seems like that's the case. Like how many times do you have to say hey, ho, ho, Donald Trump has got to go. Like, it's just these people.
Well, it's also what I really would wonder is those people who are chanting that. That's fine for a chant. What is your reasoning underneath it? Like, if you sat down with one of these people, would they be able to articulate the reasons why they want Trump to go? I'm sure some of them can.
Yeah.
But how many of them can? That is where I would be interested in it. And I'm not saying like there's no good reason to not get rid of Trump. I mean, hell, I like the guy and I'm going to be voting for him. My point is that do these people have reasons behind the sloganeering?
Well, yeah, let's be fair here. Like, there's definitely people on the right who have a very instinctual sense of politics. They don't necessarily know what they're fighting for. We see that on the Republican side as well. Like the Republicans are very good at chants as well. Lock her up and build that wall. But it's not just the instincts that we need to address. It's also the proclivity to commit violence. That is an issue that we're currently facing with the left.
Well, that's the thing is it's the commission of the violence that is the worst part. I mean, honestly, any kind of rhetoric is harmless. I mean, we've got free speech in this country. You can say whatever you want for whatever reasons that you want.
As obnoxious as they may sound, we do have free speech, and we kind of have to face it. But we have a certain, I guess, political sect of this country that has come to a point where they think that violence is necessary, which is scary. Which is absolutely scary. I don't know, what justify they're going after against other fellow Americans. They even go after people who may even agree with them. So,
well, you certainly see them going after people who are theoretically on the side that they should be working with.
Yeah.
I mean, lest we forget Officer Dorner, the retired police officer who was beaten to death as part of these riots.
Yep.
Let's not forget about the 8-year-old girl in Atlanta who was shot because her parents' car accidentally got close to a BLM riot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, both those people, black. You're touting around the Black Lives Matter banner, and yet you are actively killing black people.
Yep.
I personally see a major disconnect there.
Mm-hmm. No, this is more than ironic. This is absolute travesty as well as tragedy.
Tragedy more than anything else.
Yeah. It's
no. I suppose the problem is that tragedy has a sense of like inevitability to it. No, I guess it's not a tragedy. No, you were right initially. It is a travesty. It is an absolute travesty because those people would have never died if these people weren't protesting the way that. Sorry, not protesting, rioting the way that they are.
Yeah.
Don't get trapped in the same kind of rhetoric that the media is trying to push on us. Let's call it what it is. It's rioting. Nobody's arguing about the protests. If there's any kind of actual legitimate protests that are going on, that's perfectly fine. But nobody's talking about that. We are all talking about the riots.
There should be a strong delineation between what is a protester and what is a rioter.
That's probably one of the most infuriating parts of all of this is that on the top layer there is a complete refusal to acknowledge that distinction.
Yep. It's the media has been very terrible in covering the protesters as well as the rioters. And I mean, you even have like Don Lemon. Maybe it wasn't Don Lemon who said that, but you do have certain people in the media who basically provided a sort of impunity for the rioters, and that this was about this is one of the reasons why I think I guess the Democrats hadn't really talked about the riots in during the DNC. I think
it's because mostly they understand and they fully know, even though they won't admit this publicly, but they fully know it's an untenable position to have to be in favor of rioters.
Right, and you don't want riots. Like, not just white people are affected. There are black business owners as well. Anyone is collateral during a riot. Anyone. A minority, gay, whatever.
Well, I mean, at this point, it really does feel like it's mostly black people who are being mostly affected. Again, It was a black 8-year-old girl shot in Atlanta. It was the black former police officer beaten to death in the riots. And now we've got, in the case of the Chop Chaws thing from Seattle, it was a black teenager who was shot and killed in there because there were no police who were able to get in there, secure the scene, and get EMTs to him. And now his father is suing the city for millions of dollars for wrongful death. And I hope to God that he wins.
Rightly
because
so.
The city completely failed in its duties to protect people by clearing out and just letting that situation happen. And that resulted in the death of that kid.
You're absolutely right in that. What is the point of government? So government is not really a business, but it does have an obligation to the people who pay the taxes. And the city of Seattle failed in its duty to protect the taxpayers, the people who provide the tax revenue for the government, the business owners, the bystanders.
Even more than that. Yes, it is the tax-paying residents and it's the tax-paying businesses who provide the revenue, but that revenue is meant to go to protect everybody, irrespective of situation. Even if you're somebody who is in a position where you can't pay any kind of taxes, you are still supposed to be protected. And what we're seeing is a lot of dereliction of duty in a lot of these cities.
Right. Whether if you are a business owner or even a child, yes.
Or even an unemployed homeless person, you are supposed to enjoy the exact same protections.
You have to be protected, exactly. And you're right. There was a dereliction of duty with the cities of Seattle, with Portland. We have places where my parents live, and they live in the suburbs. They're not in an urban area. They're not in like Oakland or San Francisco. We're seeing it being spread in the suburbs, and government local government, not federal government, local government, or even state government, like they're failing the people. They're failing the residents who live in those areas. This it's again, it's a complete travesty of our own rule of law and civil society. We're not becoming civil. It's an America I don't want us to turn into. We've created certain institutions in this country so that we can vent and express our own concerns, issues, and I guess
well, to be able to make our voices heard.
Complaints, have our voices heard. And if people are relegating themselves to riots, like what's the point of all of these institutions? That's what they're there for.
Well, it tears it all down. It removes the possibility of those protections in the future. And quite frankly, in the more immediate sense, I think it completely counters whatever kind of argument you were trying to make in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I genuinely do feel like at this point, a lot of people don't care about the issue of police brutality. A lot of people really don't. They care far more about the rioters and what they're doing, and would probably welcome a level of increased police brutality. And that is not something that we should accept or want, but that's going to be a simple fact of where I think a lot of people's minds are.
I guess.
And that is something that, frankly, to me is really the most upsetting thing, is the complete dereliction of duty that is allowing these riots to go on is completely destroying what we possibly could have had in terms of us taking a look at the actual issues that theoretically all of this should have been based off of in the first place.
You may, or maybe you may not. So I think there's definitely a good portion of this population who do want to address police brutality. I'm actually one of those people who actually donate some money to a cause to address police brutality. I don't like military policing. I think some of the things that the police have done don't warrant in certain situations. But I think we're kind of underestimating some of the things that how pervasive BLM has become. If you look at Fortune 500 companies, they have come out in support of BLM and against police brutality. I do have friends who are on social media who voiced their own opinions on police brutality and BLM. I think to some extent you're a bit underestimating how pervasive the messages on BLM and police brutality.
No, here's the thing: is I don't think I'm underestimating it. The problem is that I think it's completely hijacked and going a different direction. What I would say to you in terms of those points there is that Al Qaeda had a lot of businesses and a lot of money behind it as well. And at this point, I'm not making that comparison lightly. I think at this point, BLM is on the level of being an Al Qaeda.
Well,
with everything that implies.
Well, I think to some degree it could happen. Seeing how extreme the left has become, the fact that they're sanctioning violence. I think they're sanctioning the harassment of certain people. They're calling out names. I'm not sure if they've come to that point of being Al Qaeda, but they are becoming like communists and certain people who've like threatened to list names of people. Like we saw that recently with Talcum X. I forgot what was his name. He's like one of these like African American civil rights activist, or he thinks he's a civil rights activist. Actually, the African American community has come out against him. But he threatened to list the names of police officers involved in the shooting in Kenosha, I believe.
Oh, I forget the name, but I know generally who you're talking about. No, the problem there is that he's not talking about listing names of the officers who were actually involved. He's talking about listing the names and addresses and the families of all anyone. Police officers for the entire city.
Of anyone. Exactly.
And treating them all as equal targets. Again, I stand by what I said before. Al-Qaeda. That is a terroristic threat. Because what is the point of listing the names unless you are expecting people to go out there and do something about it? And we've already had this come up already. BLM has perpetrated modern-day lynchings. I mean, again, there was another black police officer who was shot in his home when rioters came to his home and fired a shotgun through his door, wounded him.
I think you're absolutely right in that. I think we need it. It sounds PC, but I don't fucking care. It's that we have come to a point where we are actually seeing modern day lynchings of people. This is not the country I want to become. This is not what I want. I thought we got past that. We decided as a society to use the institutions of our own court system and rule of law to place certain people to justice. And we are a country of laws, not of men. And a certain group of people have decided otherwise. I don't believe in that. Caius, like that's an absolutely good point. We are looking at modern day lynchings. I'm kind of surprised no one has actually said that word on Twitter.
I'm not surprised. I mean, given how insular Twitter is and how much on the narrative it is. But that's the problem, is that is something that should be put out there. I don't use Twitter myself, but I think that that's something, if people do use it, that's got to become a hashtag. I suppose that's how it works on there.
Yeah, it's hashtag.
Hashtag lynching. Because I genuinely don't think that there's any other way of describing it.
No, yeah, like this whole history of lynchings has always been through mob rule. And
mob rule with no concern to the actual events or the actual evidence in place.
Who find that the court systems are not adequate enough to address their issues, to address justice, and so they act extrajudiciously. Judicially.
Yep.
Judiciously.
Gotta sound that out.
To punish people. Judiciously. So no, you're absolutely right. I never.
I'm the one with the tequila, but it sounds like you've had quite a bit more of that box wine, my friend.
Oh man, I've had half a box, I think.
Sorry. Anyways, continue.
Blackout box.
Good name.
Okay, name. So no, but you're absolutely right. I don't want to I don't want to ignore the gravitas of what you said, but I think that needs to be said a lot more. We're looking at modern day lynchings of people on the right, of black of Trump supporters and police officers.
Mainly the police officers.
Mhm.
It's mostly to me the police officers, because I think that there is a legitimate thing to be said about police brutality in this country. But the problem is that I think it mostly comes down to individual people. The problem would be that we have an institution that protects police officers irrespective of anything else, because it's one of those things where police unions and police organizations would err on the side of caution. Where I can
Mhm.
agree with them, probably from my perspective of things, and somebody could certainly argue against me on this, but where I'm coming from, I would feel like 99% of the time, police officers are generally in the right. They're doing their job and they did things correctly. And they were not doing anything superseding what they're supposed to do. But you do have that 1% situation. And the problem is that that 1% situation falls into the protection of the other 99 without a proper distinction. That is where the real problem lays. And that is something that we should be trying to fix. But the problem is that you see these entire protests are talking about a complete abolishment of police. That is completely going against a bunch of men and women who are doing things appropriately to try to protect us and to try to do their job. And frankly, just a bunch of men and women who are just out there just working, just doing standard stuff. I mean, another situation that happened in Kenosha, for the once, this is a police officer who was not black. Have you seen the video of at the very in the evening after the what was his name? Jason Blake?
I believe so.
Just trying to remember and make sure. I'm terrible with names. In the evening after the
Jacob Blake.
Jacob Blake. In the evening after the Jacob Blake shooting, the police officers were still there, locking down the scene. They were trying to move their car out of the area. Molotov cocktail was thrown at it. They started to retreat back to their car. All of a sudden, one of the police officers, a white police officer, went down to the ground because he got hit in the head with a brick. And he had done nothing. Nobody had drawn any weapons. Nobody was doing anything. They were trying to leave. And that police officer was somebody who came in to secure the scene after the fact, obviously not involved with any kind of a shooting. I mean, again, to me, it's a justified term to put it into. That is a situation of lynching.
No, it's crazy how insane this country has become recently, and you're absolutely right. We're looking at a situation in which a certain group of people that is like police officers, they're being targeted. Look, I think there's a certain level of police brutality that I don't like. I do see that there's a sense of militarization of the police at times, but at the same time, we're actually one of the most well-armed citizens in the world, and you have to have a certain level of empathy with how police officers go about their day. At any point, they could die, and it's also a fear of people who may have certain firearms with them. Just because it's something they have to deal with every day. Police officers are very stressed. I'm not sure how much time that they have in terms of vacation per year. But a lot of these people work much of the year, patrolling our streets, our neighborhoods. And I don't like police brutality. I want to say that again. I don't like it. I've dealt with the police at times. I've even dealt in Denver, where I was driving around at night near the clubs, and one of the cops was just looked stressed and seemed to like be very erratic and was just not having it and just like like it's a stressful job.
Which is a thing,
it's a stressful
right?
job. It's a stressful job.
Well, that's the thing right there, is that obviously you should not be subject to any kind of harassment because somebody is tired or stressed.
Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like when we're talking about a job like the police, we're not talking about somebody working at the counter of your Starbucks who is snippy when you order some kind of special coffee. I mean, we're talking on a whole different level, and I want to make that clear. While I would say 100% unequivocally, I am far more pro-police than not. Well, probably to a large extent compared to some people who might be listening. That means that the police should be held to an extremely high degree. And stress and tiredness does not come into it. Like, that is not an excuse for the police acting badly and treating anybody badly. But to me, the problem is that what we're looking at is you see a lot of calls for the abolition of police, or abolishment of police, I should say, and complete defunding of police. Whereas to me, the solution is we need to have way more funding, and we need to expand the police way more. No police officer should be working more than 8 hours because we don't want them to be stressed and in that kind of tense situation. We want them to be focused and on their A game. And that means that we shouldn't have police officers that need to pull a 16-hour shift and be in that kind of position that you're describing. We should have a situation where that police officer who's patrolling the clubs late at night is fresh. That's his schedule. It's set up. That's what he knows that he's going to do. They're ready to do it, and they're on the ball.
And plus, we also want to provide more training, and so that we want to provide more funding so that they're better trained.
A lot more funding, so that way there's a lot more training for them, and that way there's a lot more police officers as well to be able to fulfill all the shifts. Yeah, that's where I see it. That to me is what the solution would actually be.
I've met an FBI agent in the past who had said that the FBI agents are trained pretty well, and it's because they do weekly trainings with certain scenarios, how with how they address certain situations with civilians. They have very extensive as well as comprehensive training every month. But he said something that he wished that local police officers, local law enforcement would have that same training as the FBI, because local law enforcement are absolutely far more in danger than FBI agents, because
without a doubt, because they're just dealing with things when it's just there's no potential of a crime, but it can escalate to a crime instantly. I mean, we've all seen videos of a situation where a police officer pulls over somebody, it's a routine traffic stop, and just bam, shot in the face instantly.
Yes, exactly. And it's an absolutely a dangerous job. Look, I want to say this again, I don't like the fact that a lot of the police departments were provided military equipment without the basic training for that kind of equipment. However, I admit it is a very dangerous job, and I think one of the major problems with how the left is going about with addressing police brutality is that it all seems very anecdotal. We do have footage of police violence, but does police brutality, are the statistics supporting that, supporting the argument that more blacks are being targeted than other races? I think we've had
fundamentally no. According to the FBI statistics, and well, frankly, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that those are accurate. No, more white people are stopped and shot by police officers on a year-to-year basis than black people. Which makes perfect sense given the statistics of the nation. but it runs counter to the narrative that black people are much more likely to encounter police.
And I also think that pretty much what we're looking at, the way like how certain I guess races being treated, I think to some degree it's just a symptom, like police brutality or how police address black criminals or just black civilians. I think it's just a symptom of the fact that African Americans, much of the African American community live in poorer neighborhoods, and live in crime-ridden areas. That's just I would say that if you live in a crime-ridden area, there is a correlation between police, I guess, brutality and that. It's like, where would the police be? They would go to places where that they're needed the most, in places where crime is up, like. And unfortunately, a lot of African Americans live in those kinds of places. And I think in order to fix this whole situation with how, I guess, why certain a high proportion of African Americans are being arrested or being killed by the police, is to probably address the economic issues prevailing within the African American community. If we can address that, I think that could be fixed.
I agree. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think also a bit of a problem here is that we all need to be able to calm down, take a step back, and actually actually wait for the facts to come out.
Yeah.
Before we pass judgment on a situation.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this whole Jacob Blake thing really put things into stark relief. Where initially the entire narrative was, oh, it was an innocent guy, he was breaking up a fight, and the police just shot him in the back. Well, no, it's turned out that's not the situation. The guy had broken into a woman's home and was stealing her stuff. The police were on scene specifically because of him. He was the reason that the police were called in the first place. He had an active felony warrant out for his arrest. He fought the police, and this you can see in the second video that was recorded that day from the other side of the car. Everybody's seen the video where he walks around to his driver door. I don't think enough people have seen the video that was taken from the other side of the car where he's fighting with the police, and they also try to tase him, and the taser didn't work. And that was before he walked around the other side of the car. Mm-hmm. So I just look at the situation, and it's here, like, there's nothing to argue about. This is a situation where I firmly believe the police acted entirely appropriately, given the circumstances of the immediate situation.
It's, as just like what I guess Samuel L. Jackson's character in Pulp Fiction said, we all have to stay cool. I think when you have firearms within a situation, you do have to have a certain level of apprehension and caution.
Not just firearms, any kind of a weapon. I mean, a knife is, frankly, by and large, a knife is way more deadly than a gun in situations where you are within 25 feet of each other.
Oh, you saw that Red Letter Media training video.
Surviving edge weapons, but I mean, like, you can also look up the Mythbusters thing, and I mean, you can just look at just general statistics about this. And also, I think anybody who actually owns firearms and uses firearms would be able to tell you the same. It ain't that easy. It feels like to people who are unfamiliar with guns, like, oh, it's just point and click, right? Well, that's not how that works. Mm-hmm. I mean, your bullet can go wide. Aiming is actually very difficult. That's why people go to firing ranges and practice over and over and over again to try to make sure that their shots are going where they actually want them to go. I mean, if you've got somebody who's moving erratically that close to you, it would be very, very difficult to actually shoot them.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we've spoken for about an hour and a half, and I think we need to end this episode, unfortunately. Is there anything else that we need to cover or to address before we decide to call it quits?
I can't think of anything. Anything I could say would be in line with this, and well, let's be perfectly honest. Since we live in a Jackson Pollock timeline where everything is just splatters and completely doesn't make any sense, we'll have plenty of this to discuss next time.
Oh yes, I think so. I think we do have a lot of stuff to discuss in the future. I think we actually covered a lot of things that we've hinted at certain topics that we may have to cover in a couple of weeks. But yes, I think we've pretty much covered much of what we needed, and I think we pretty much hit the mark. Yeah, I think we're done here. So I think this has been a very, very good discussion. There have been certain topics. There have been certain points that you brought up that have actually have hit me. Have definitely left an indelible mark. I believe. So.
Well, and that's the thing is like I suppose in that regard, if there's one thing that I can possibly say to try to leave us on, is that we need to have way more discussion. People need to be able to listen to other people, and people need to be able to communicate. That is the one thing that I think is missing in this country that we don't have enough of. We just got to have conversations.
I think so
you
too.
And I think that everybody needs to realize that you got to sit down and you got to listen to people who you fundamentally disagree with.
I think one of the major problems with our present timeline right now is that we've basically relegated our discussions to social media, which is an absolutely terrible platform on which one is to discuss very, very serious issues. For one thing, you don't see anyone face to face, and so you don't have a emotional connection with your opposing conversationalists. And
also, as everybody has experienced, the very basic tenets of human conversation, very simple facets in there are not able to be conveyed through text. Somebody can write something and you don't know if they're serious or if they're being sarcastic, because sarcasm doesn't carry through text.
You can have as many emojis as you want, but there's no way to replace an actual face. In presence. So, but yeah, that's another topic that we can definitely discuss. But yes, this was a great episode. Yeah, I think we should definitely call it quits here. So yeah. So whatever. So this has been Alex and Caius.
Caius, yes.
I forgot your name because I've been drinking so much blackout box.
No problem. Well, an appropriate name and an appropriate feeling to come from it then.
Yep. So regardless of what happens during this election cycle or whatever.
Well, if you don't mind, if I can possibly take over there. Well, so far tonight we have shared our thoughts and imparted some ideas about the current state of politics. Things are certainly going to go to hell regardless of anything that we've said, but remember, don't blame us. We're voting for Kodos.
Good night.